Welcome back to Shadow of the Puppet. This is the continuation of the previous episode. If you haven't heard it yet, we highly recommend you go back and listen, because what happens next won't make sense without it. Shadow of the Puppet. Episode 3. Claire wasn't the first. The room was cold, not just from the weather. It was the kind of cold that seeps into your skin and settles behind your bones, the kind that has nothing to do with winter and everything to do with memory. Detective Elias Drevick stood in front of the empty hospital bed. The man he fought, the man with one porcelain cheek and half a burned face, Julian Matheson, had disappeared without a trace. No one saw him leave. No cameras, no witnesses, no noise. Only a note, folded into a perfect triangle, like a wedding vow. You broke the ceremony, but I still have one more bride, Claire. The name hit Elias like a blade to the chest, not because he had forgotten, but because deep down he always feared she wasn't an accident. Claire, his fiancée, killed 3 years ago in a bus explosion, declared an act of terror, unsolved, unexplained, quickly buried. But what if it wasn't random? What if it was Julian's first wedding? He pulled every archived case file he had locked away in his flat. Photos of Claire, the wreckage, the forensics, the explosion's epicenter. Something didn't match. The official story claimed a pressure bomb planted by radicals. But the blast radius was focused, almost surgical. And the only passenger who died was Claire. No casualties, no manifesto, no claims. Just Claire. She had been on her way to meet Elias that night, to surprise him after a long shift. He remembered now. She texted just before boarding the bus. "Someone gave me a gift, a tiny handmade violin. It's adorable." His hands shook. He never made the connection. Until now. If Julian killed Claire 3 years ago, then she wasn't the first. She was simply the first successful ceremony. There had to be more. Earlier. Younger. Forgotten. Elias returned to Dr. Helena Jorgensen, the retired child psychiatrist who had first mentioned Julian. He showed her the note. The photo. The scarred sketch of Julian from the burned institution records. Her face went pale. "I knew it," she whispered. "He's completing the circle." "What circle?" Helena closed her eyes. Julian didn't begin as a killer. He began as a child, a boy with a gift, and a curse. He had one friend, one girl, one connection, before everything went wrong. Her name was Lena Skov. Age 11, shy, gentle, bookish. She was the only child in Julian's special education group who treated him kindly. They sat together. She called him her puppet prince. For a few months he was happy, but happiness is a dangerous thing in the wrong hands. One day Julian asked her to marry him, with a ring made of red string and a button. Lena laughed, not cruelly, just as a child does, innocently. "You're silly," she said. "You're not a prince. You're my little puppet." That night she disappeared. 3 days later they found her body in the school's old art room, hanging by red string, dressed in paper lace, and a note pinned to her chest. "She made me her puppet. Now she's mine forever." But the institution covered it up, labeled it an accident, a play gone wrong. Julian was sedated for weeks, but something inside him changed. He never smiled again. He stopped speaking. He began sewing. Dolls. Always female, always brides. When the institution burned down years later, he vanished. But he had already begun choosing, not for revenge, but for perfection. Elias traced Lena's records, then Claire's, then Sasha, Rhea, Isla. Each girl fit the same frame, not just in looks, but in behavior. Kind, warm, curious, the type of girl who makes eye contact with a stranger and smiles. That's all it took. A smile, a nod, a kindness. To Julian, that was a vow. And if they didn't fulfill it, he'd finish the ceremony his way, Later that night, Elias sat alone in his flat, his walls covered with threads and faces. He played an old voice message Claire left him the week before she died. "I saw this boy at the bus stop today. He looked strange but had this tiny puppet in his lap. I smiled at him. He didn't smile back, just stared. It gave me chills." Elias paused the message. She had smiled. That was her mistake. Then came the call. Blocked number. He answered. Breath. Just breath. Then a voice. Familiar, childlike, and hollow. She didn't scream like the others, Elias. She waited. She wore the dress. She even cried a little. She was the most perfect bride I ever had. But now I'm lonely again. Click. Elias looked to the corner of the room. The doll was back, not the one from before. A new one. This one wore a police badge, and the red string around its neck spelled a name. Isabella. Shadow of the Puppet. Episode 4. The Isabella Tapes. The rain had stopped, but the silence it left behind felt louder than thunder. Detective Elias Drevick sat frozen at his desk, staring at the new doll, the one that hadn't been there a moment ago. It was small, childlike, but not innocent. It wore a miniature police uniform, complete with a stitched badge that looked exactly like his own. The doll's mouth was open. Mid-scream, carved into a frozen moment of terror, and around its neck was a loop of red thread, not tied but carefully braided. Each knot formed a single name. Isabella. His fingers trembled as he reached for the intercom. Dispatch. I need an address check. Isabella Brandt. 12 years old. Student at Lingby Public. There was a pause. Then a voice crackled through the static. Confirmed. She's listed under protective custody. Current guardian? Elias Drevick. He dropped the mic, because now he remembered. 3 years ago, after Claire's death, Elias took a temporary case involving a child witness, the only survivor of a triple homicide in Mold. The child had seen her father kill her mother, then himself, all while whispering about a boy in a mask who told him to do it. The department chalked it up to trauma hallucination, but Elias didn't. He kept in contact, checked on her once a year, sent her gifts anonymously. He never thought she would become part of this. He arrived at Isabella's foster home just past midnight. The windows were dark. The front door was open. No sounds, no crying, no screaming, just music. A soft music box lullaby echoing from inside, that same warped melody he'd heard at the puppet theater. His gun drawn, Elias stepped inside. There, on the living room floor, was a tiny tape recorder, and next to it, Isabella's teddy bear, its head torn, stuffing spilling out. The walls were covered in drawings, hundreds of them, all done in crayon, all of the same figure. A tall man in a raincoat, a burned face, always holding a puppet. Each picture was labeled, shakily, in a child's handwriting, "My friend, Julian." Elias hit play on the recorder. It crackled. Then Isabella's voice, soft, scared, whispering. "He said he likes me. He said I'm quiet. He said I don't scream like the others. He told me not to be afraid. He said you were going to ruin the wedding." There was a pause. Then another voice, male, gentle, cold. "Do you know why dolls don't cry, Isabella? Because they belong. They never leave. And you are my final bride." Elias ran to the girl's room. Empty, except for her bed, neatly made. On the pillow lay a red ribbon veil, and beside it a map, hand-drawn, sketched in blood. The lines led to a place Elias hadn't seen in years, a place from Claire's old childhood journal, a place she always dreamed of getting married, Trollkirke Caves, the Church of Trolls, a sacred, secluded cave system deep in the mountains, accessible only on foot, silent, secluded, forgotten. a perfect place for a ceremony. By dawn, Elias was climbing. The forest was damp, the path was steep. His breath came in clouds. The wind carried whispers. Or maybe it was just the ghosts. As he entered the cave mouth, the scent of wax and rotting silk filled his nose. Candles flickered. Dozens of dolls lined the walls, all handmade, all lifeless. Then he saw her, Isabella, standing in front of a stone altar, hands bound, a veil over her face. Julian stood beside her, but this time he wore no mask. His burned face was exposed, melting like wax, and yet he smiled. She was waiting, Elias, like Claire did, like Lena did. They all waited. You're always too late. Elias raised his gun. Julian didn't flinch. Shoot me, and she screams. Let me finish, and she'll never cry again. Isabella trembled. Her mouth had been sewn with a single red thread, not pierced yet, just resting across her lips. Elias lowered the gun. Take me instead, he said. Julian paused. A groom, he whispered. I've never had a groom before. He stepped closer, and that's when Isabella moved. A sudden kick, hard into Julian's leg. The needle slipped. He stumbled. Elias shot once, right through the puppet in Julian's hand. Julian screamed, not in pain, but in rage, as if the puppet had been part of his soul. The cave shook. Julian lunged. Elias fired again, this time into Julian's shoulder. The man collapsed against the altar, bleeding out. His final words were barely audible. I just wanted them to love me, like dolls do. He died staring at the broken puppet on the floor. Elias carried Isabella out. She didn't cry, didn't scream, but as they reached the edge of the woods, she looked up at him and whispered, He said this wasn't the end. He said there are more like him. He said, the puppets never stop.